24 minutes in the books in Phoenix, and the Suns leading the Oklahoma City Thunder 53-48. Sprint halftime report here from Studio J in Atlanta. Ernie Johnson, Shaquille O'Neal, Kenny the Jet Smith, and Charles Barkley. We're going to forego the normal analysis of the first half of this game and talk about the passing of Earl Lloyd, a true pioneer in the NBA, the first African-American player in the NBA in 1950 as he played with the Washington Capitals, later won an NBA championship with the Syracuse Gnats, later coached briefly the Detroit Pistons in the early 70s, and a Hall of Famer in 2003. And you heard Reggie Miller talk about it in the first half. You heard Kevin Harlan and David Aldridge talk about him coming up with Chuck Cooper and Nat Sweetwater Clifton in that same year. And just so happened that his game was scheduled first, and by virtue of the schedule, Earl Lloyd became the first African-American player in the NBA. But he's, baseball had Jackie Robinson, and the NBA had those three, and certainly Earl Lloyd, the first to put the uniform on and play in a game.
Yeah, I got a chance to meet Mr. Lloyd, and one of my heroes is Joe Morgan, the baseball player, and he told me he just wanted to meet Jackie Robinson one time, just say thank you. And I've always used that anytime I met one of the great black men who played in the league and made it popular for us. I'm not even it's better today, but I just really appreciate them, quote unquote, doing all the heavy lifting. So when I met Mr. Lloyd, I told just thank you for everything. Every time I see Bill Russell, Spencer Haywood, Tiny Archibald and JoJo White, guys like that, I just tell them thank you, because, we can't even imagine the circumstances, not just trying to play basketball, but doing all the other civil rights movements that was going on, where they stayed, where they ate and things like that. And you just got to admire those guys. So thank you, Mr. Earl Lloyd.
I urge children to learn about the history of the game. I'll be the first to admit that when I started playing basketball, I thought the game was invented with Dr. J. Dr. J was my first guy watching the Fishin save Pittsburgh. I thought he was at the beginning of the NBA, but as I learned about history, I learned about Spencer Haywood and Mr. Lloyd. And you can only say thank you. So like whenever I see the greats, similar to what Chuck does at the All-Star game, I say thank you. I had the chance to meet the great George Mikan many, many times, and he asked me for my autograph one time. And I was like, he's like, Shaq, you know who I am? I was like, yes, sir, I know who you are. And he passed away. I paid for his funeral, but the pioneers have definitely set the way. So I urge young children to really learn about the history of the NBA, about the game. It's a fabulous game. I also got to hear about him from Coach Sharman. I made the statement a long time ago that when I talk to certain legends, that helped me bring my game to the next level. So sitting there having a conversation with Bill Sharman, I know he was influential in Mr. Lloyd's career. He stuck up for him as a white guy. Yeah. And so, I got to learn a little about him from Mr. Sharman. But, whenever I see the greats, I just have to say thank you.
Now, Earl Lloyd pointed that out, too. He later in his career, he talked about Bill Sharman's influence in making that transition easier for him. What do you think, Jen?
I mean, a great celebration of his life, because he made it to the point where you don't even think about an African-American player. You don't say that. You say, oh, he's a great player. You never say, you never prerequisite with his color, his race, or anything else. And Chuck Cooper, along with Sweetwater Clifton, actually was a trio that actually came into the league together as three black African-American players. And his game, like you said, Ernie, was first. And my very first feature when I was started here at Turner was with Earl Lloyd. Sent me out and talked about him, and I got to interview him, got to talk to him about being the first African-American basketball player. So my very first feature as a Turner person was with Earl Lloyd. So this was a very special moment for me. And, our condolences go to the Lloyd family. But again, it's a celebration because he put it to the fact where they don't say an African-American player, a white player, they say he can play.
Yeah. Earl Lloyd passes at the age of 86. We'll be back. Sprint, more data, more highlights. Game one of our double dip LeBron James and the Cavs, 10 straight wins at home, got Golden State, best record in the NBA in town. David Lee from Andre Iguodala. But LeBron James, I know he's saying like there was no message sent, but there was a message sent.
Yeah, this is a litmus test game because if you lose to a team that's a contender, you got to say, well, what do we need to do to become a contender, a better contender? So this was a litmus test game for Cleveland, who had been struggling early in the year, and now they're on the roll.
Well,
You said earlier, Kenny.
I don't know. I don't think that was a litmus test, Kenny. I think LeBron. Everybody's talking about Steph Curry and James Harden and Westbrook as MVP. I think he wanted to say, like, you know, it still is my MVP.
That's what I just said.
Well, I don't pay you any attention when you're talking.
You ain't got to.
Well, it's not still his MVP because Kevin Durant has it right.
TK, set it up.
Right, Ernie.
Charity boxing match.
But he's got 4 of them.
May 5th.
May 5th.
Right here, May 5th.
Hey, I got